Welcome to Russell County Middle School. I'm David Couch with this month's Kentucky K-12 EdTech Leaders Webcast. This is our way to get feedback from our host district here in Russell County, their superintendent and their team, along with sharing some of the things going on at the federal and state level. You all can provide live feedback during the webcast through Go Soapbox. The login's EdTech. It was sent to you in the meeting invite yesterday. We have opened up two soapbox questions for you to respond to. You can start doing that now. But also any kind of questions that you have you'd like to bring up with the host district or myself or any part of our team, feel free to do that. We have some folks here that are monitoring that feedback throughout here. So I'm joined here with the KD team. Got Dee Dee Connor and Phil Coleman. Heather Worrell is in the audience here somewhere, and Judy Evans is the leader of all the districts in this region from our team. And I'm here with Superintendent Mike Ford.
Good morning.
And good morning, and CIO Chris Bell. How you doing? Let's talk about the district from your perspective. We're not. I'm going to talk to you throughout the webcast, but just highlight some of the things that you all are doing here within the district. I'm just kind of looking at a couple of things. Let's talk about sports first. Your girls team made it to the Sweet 16.
I was hoping that's where you was going to start at. That's right.
And playing the first round against Franklin County. I'm familiar with Franklin County because they're in our district. I go to my kids have gone to Woodford County, so I know what kind of good team that was. They made it to the finals, and you took that team to how many overtimes?
3 overtimes.
3 overtimes.
We will not forget that.
made them work for it, and I know what those kind of events, and no one has to really keep up with sports a lot in depth to know what that does for community, the excitement that it has.
Absolutely, David. I mentioned this last night at our school board meeting. The amount, you mentioned community, but the amount of support this community gave that team, and not only the team itself, but just our kids in general, to afford them the opportunity to go. Because we had over 600 and something pre-sale tickets. We took, I think, 4 or 5 pep buses, but the community paid for the bulk of kids' tickets, money for food, and everything. So we just really appreciate our community support, and we certainly, again, congratulations to our girls and the coaching staff and everyone that made that happen. So it was a rallying cry for Russell County, absolutely.
You also had some news. I'm a Twitter follower of yours, and I know you had a board meeting last night, but also, and I'm not sure at the board meeting, did you recognize the Governor Cup or talk about the Governor's Cup?
We did. The board recognized all of the students that participated at the state Governor's Cup competition, middle school and high school, and it was one of the largest, maybe the largest, not only in the number of students, but in the number of subject areas that was represented in that. So we had everything from composition to general knowledge and stuff in between. So it wasn't that we were just specialized in one subject area. We had a number of subject areas. So anytime you can celebrate those academic achievements, it's a great day. And so I know all the board members, they appreciate that, and everyone had their picture made with the kids last night to kind of showcase them. So it was another good evening of recognizing our student achievements.
You also had someone we have every year in Louisville. We have the Kentucky Society for Technology and Education has their big conference, and at the end of it is kind of they highlight a couple of individuals that have done outstanding work across the state. You had one of the folks here within this district, but I'm going to give a couple other ones before them.
Okay.
The Making IT Happen Award was Gary Grant, and he's been the KISTI leader for quite some time. He's been invaluable to us with our Student Technology Leadership Program across the state. And I know him from his Meade County days. My wife's from Meade County, so I have that. But he's been a great choice, and he'll represent us well in San Antonio. The Technology Leader of the Year and Overall Leader of the Year was Steve Gum of Barron County. And anyone knows Steve, he's done great work in Barron County. But we also recognize the Teacher Leader of the Year. And that Teacher Leader of the Year came from
Russell County High School, right here in Russell County. It's not the first time Mr. Godby's been recognized, too, because he's been Campbellsville University Excellence in Teaching Award, and so he's not a first timer to recognizing his accomplishments and his significance to Russell County students.
So let's do this, because I want to pan to let you see Christopher or Chris Godby. You have your half-hour speech ready, right, Chris?
He can do it.
But I'll let you introduce the rest of the members of your team. That'd probably be a good time as we pan, going from Chris to your principal to your board members.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chris Bell, our Chief Information Officer. This is actually Mr. Mayor Shear, Nick Shear. He's Mayor of the City of Jamestown. And then next to him is Mr. Richard Kazook. He's our Board Vice Chair. Of course, we have Mr. Godby there in the very front row, and then directly behind him is Joy Wilson, a school board member, Mr. Gerald Murray, a school board member, and Mrs. Brenda Hickenbotham, a school board member. And I think that speaks a lot there, Mr. Couch, that we have so many board members represented at this meeting today. And you can find them at events such as this. You can find them at our community pep rallies, to spelling bees, to ball games, and everything in between. So we have great board member support here in Russell County.
Yeah. The other thing I know you're doing here is let's talk about just the technology part of it. Did you want to highlight your Laker Success Academy, your Anchor University, the Odyssey Ware, and kind of what you're using those for within your district?
Absolutely. And again, this speaks back to the board support. And a lot of people made this happen, but our Laker Success Academy, it's an alternative learning environment, not an alternative in the sense where students are in trouble. It's not that, but it's an alternative learning environment. It's performance-based credits to where a student may have a family obligation, student may have a work obligation, students have a hardship situation, whatever the issue is. But they come to that, and you talk about the technology that's involved in that. We do use Odyssey Ware, but it's coupled with, you really want to think about it as blending learning. So the students take advantage of coursework, and we don't exclude them from taking an ag class or taking a welding at their area technology. All those things are open to them. But most importantly, they can have an alternative schedule to where students can come and go. And it may, you have to step back, and people have to get comfortable with non-traditional things happening for students, right? You have to be comfortable with maybe I'm 18 years old and I work a third shift.
Yeah.
And I may come in at 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning, not here at 7:30.
Right.
So we have to be comfortable with those types of things and look for different opportunities. And again, this was made possible with the board committing 2 regular education teachers, a special education teacher, and an instructional assistant to that academy, what we refer to as the Laker Success Academy. So we owned students that were not graduating. We said that's a problem in Russell County. We need to do something to reach these students and provide for them. So that's what this is all came about. And again, our DPP and many others, Ms. Dameron, many others had a hand in that, the high school administration. But at the end of the day, you talk about the technology part with Odyssey Ware, we do that. But it's more than just setting a student in front of a computer. So anybody can do that. But hats off to the teachers and staff there. We have Ryan Richardson, Shannon Tarter, Samantha Ellis, and Courtney Brown, because they teach, David, in connection to that computer software. But you can go in there anytime, and you'll see a teacher, oftentimes one-on-one or in a small group, providing that instruction. So the computers are great, and the alternative learning platforms are great. But we found that they're most successful when you have true facilitators happening.
Right.
And you have true teachers with that, really, really working one-on-one, answering questions. And so, and they joke that sometimes they may be answering a student's question 10 o'clock on a Friday night or on the weekend, or 2 o'clock in the morning, because kids don't oftentimes sleep the same hours we do, right?
Right.
And so, but they're that in tune to kids on their academic side and making that work for them, because recognizing that they have different needs than what we do. So that's made happen, and that's frequently we call upon Mr. Bell and his team to say, there's some computers we need. He keeps all those running for us, because it takes that infrastructure to make that happen, because we cover a wide array of subject areas, obviously, but with 3 teachers. And so it takes a lot of the manpower. They had to, we're making use of some buildings that we have on campus, and Mr. Bell and his team got that the wiring, the infrastructure, the switches, all that. I won't try to go into all the details of that, Mr. Bell. You can speak to that. But the alternative learning platform, we've been successful with Odyssey Ware, and again, we appreciate the board's support. That would not be happening if they did not allocate funds to make that happen. So it's been a great success for our students. And it's one of those things that it's not immediate, right? You don't see that return on investment. It's an investment, and when you invest in something, the return is paid off in a few years down the road. And so, when you do what's right by kids, and you make things happen for kids, and there is no cookie cutter for kids anymore, good things happen. So again, how would that look if you didn't have the opportunity to make use of technology? We would struggle with that.
Right. So one of the tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
There
And you mentioned, I think you mentioned there, Anchor University. It's kind of like on the other side of that. That's a select group of students that they may be here for a period or two. They may not be here at all. They may come in and then leave and go to a college campus and for some dual enrollment of college classes. Then they may come back. They may be on campus at there. They may go home and work on their classes or whatever. But it's a select group of students that we enrolled in what's referred to as our Anchor University, really college-driven students that are working on those college credits. So the dual credit initiative that the administration has taken place and that Russell County High School and Russell County School District has certainly embraced has been phenomenal too. But all those things couldn't happen again without the infrastructure that supports it, right? All the stuff Mr. Bell can really allude to that makes it all happen every day.
Well, let's talk about some of that. So you went to, it looks like you have dense wireless throughout all your schools, is that right?
We do.
So how did you make that happen, and why did you do that?
Well, a few years ago, we only had sporadic, of course. We only had maybe one access point for 4 classrooms, probably. Of course, the E-rate initiative a few years ago, we got the $250 per student. We were able to capitalize on that, and of course, put dense wireless throughout the district. But before that, we really didn't have the infrastructure to even carry that load. So, with our renovation of our high school, we were able to pretty much, well, we did overhaul our entire network with new switches, SPB, and of course we did the whole thing while we were at it, because some of our switches were 15 years old or older, and just we were using duct tape to keep them together,
right,
and baling wires, the old saying goes. But now we've got a good infrastructure in place, dense wireless throughout. Even our playgrounds are covered, elementary schools and football areas and that type of thing. Of course, we still got a few places we're working on, but yeah, we're dense throughout.
So a couple of things, just as a reminder. In our last month's webcast, we were in Cumberland County, and we talked about the importance of CIOs with their national legislators, talking about the importance of the E-rate funding, and just re-emphasizing that and reaching out to them, because, like you're just saying, they extended the modernization of that a few years ago, allowed more money to go toward putting dense wireless in, and the importance. And so, just like in Cumberland County and here, that does not happen without that funding in place. The other piece, I know you're doing bring your own device here. How well is that working? Are they using it in the instructional process, the devices they're bringing in?
It's kind of sporadic, really, mostly at our high school, maybe some here at the middle school, but mostly at high school. Of course, most all kids have phones, allowing that usage of those in classes. Laptops, tablets, it's working good, especially now that we have the dense wireless. Without that, of course, we were pushing it away because it just wouldn't work with it. We're ready for a one-to-one initiative if we get to that point. We're not there yet, but it's working good so far.
I know the plus and minus from the teachers. They would prefer a district issue because of the consistency of the device in front of the students versus having to try to create lesson plans and a strategy for all the different, because it can work. Both of them can work. But I just know the plus and minuses of that is from the teacher perspective. The other piece I had a question about is I saw advertised, this is a gigabit internet community. By
Little County Telecom.
That's right.
Their support.
So you have a local one that has put that in place, and so it appears that, and it's still going on now, as I understand. It's not completely put in place, but they have the ability, if really a home wants it, they could have high-speed access at their homes. And so I'll be interested to see. We do the digital readiness survey every year. Do your home access numbers go up? Because there's two pieces of it: is access, and do they have the funds to buy that? It's really those two components. So you're definitely going to have the access piece taken care of throughout Russell County here, and that's what you need. You need some kind of local provider doing that last mile to put it in place. And we've seen that in counties like Jackson County, is typically when a local telco does that and champions it, you see the home access. Where I grew up in Johnson County, same thing. We had a local telco put in place. You know, my folks' house has fiber to it, the high speeds that that they want, at a pretty affordable rate. So that's the two components of it. But even affordable, may have some families that will not have the access to it. Is this a non-traditional instructional day district or not? It is. So obviously, that will play into that strategy and be very, very important to you going forward.
NTI has not been as popular this year, though.
That's right. That's right.
We had a water break and one snow day, so
That's
we
right.
just had 2 days. Another part I want to talk about just briefly, when you mentioned the bring your own device, and of course it would take money to have consistency, right?
Yeah,
for everybody
that's right.
to have the same device. But the board has taken advantage of times when there has been an influx, for lack of a better term, of money that's not on a recurring basis. For example, we sold a school that had been previously closed a few years ago, and we had catch money in escrow. And so, when you have an influx of money that's not on recurring, you never want to allocate that to staff. You don't want to allocate that money to cover a recurring expense because it's not going to be there next time.
Right.
So my point with that is the board had voted at that time, and Mr. Bell worked with all the schools, and we took that money from the sale of the school and matched it with catch money. And Miss Judy, I'll give credit to her. She came down and met with us too when we were planning that out. And we took that money and then we divvied that out to the schools. And Chris worked with them not to just to have a plan that really met their needs. And so without the board support on initiatives like that, we could have easily said, well, we'll pay you this, but that money was devoted to technology. And we've done that on a few other occasions. And so, do we spend the money that we wish we had on technology? Certainly not, in either people or products. But we do take advantages of opportunities like that to put that into that. Yeah.
I think it's a good segue. Chris, you took part in our CIO Summit 2 weeks ago at our technology conference. What makes that unique in the United States is Kentucky is the only state that does that. You have the Superintendent Summit.
Mm-hmm.
I like that concept so well. Is we've incorporated it into when all the technology folks come up to Louisville every year. And that was our fourth year, not third year, of having that put that in place. And I want to talk about one of the items we talked about. We talked about three things. One is the people side of education technology. And then we talked about what is the funding needed to do that, because it's our intention to go before the legislature to raise the amount of money for that in a pure technical subject. So today I'm going to really focus in on that first topic. What I found pretty amazing with that is we had 75% of the districts that came to that. And we had really 80% that were registered. So 5% had things that happen at the last second, which you're going to have in certain situations. So I would encourage the districts that have never attended one of those to talk to Chris. I think that was a good experience for you.
Very good.
And I would encourage you to talk to some of the folks in Chris's position in districts beside you, say, what did I get a lot out of it? So this is a role that you would probably like, is Katie only speaks like for 5 or 10 minutes, and the district speaks for 50 minutes, right? And so you're talking amongst your peers of different parts of the state, which I think is a win-win. You get to meet some other people across the state, but also give your input. Is that right?
Yes.
So
I think it's the best thing that's happened at our technology conference since it's been going, because I've gained so much from other districts that, hey, we're not so bad after all.
right. This is some
We've
therapy.
got ways to go or whatever, yeah.
So I want to spend some time on the very first topic. So the sequence I'm going to go through is just giving you some opening thoughts. And then I'm going to go through the model that we've come up with things that we think superintendents and actually boards should consider. So be interesting just your feedback. And that's what we're kind of in this stage now, just getting feedback from different groups on what we've come up with. And then I'm going to read you for some of the feedback we got from the tables. We had 21 tables of education technology leaders across the state. So I'm going to read you some of the highlights that they produced. And I'm not going to get to the second item that we had on the agenda, the funding. I'm going to save that for the next webcast, because the stuff from the first one was so juicy that it's not going to make time for it. So let's talk about the first one. And I'm just going to give you a heads up. I'm going to use a sports analogy. I know not everybody's into sports, but I'm going to keep it at a very high level. I've been a youth coach for over 20 years of youth sports in Woodford County, 5 different sports, boys and girls. And so in all age groups, elementary, middle school, and high school. So I'm going to use that analogy of some of the things I've dealt with. I noticed when I walked in this building, you had all the baseball equipment lined up. And I can my son plays high school baseball, so I recognize that as they put the equipment there, and they usually have a game. And
It's the season.
It's the season of baseball. So it's probably a good time. I know we're in the mix of March Madness, but I'm going to use a baseball analogy as well, though it does apply to other sports. Let's just talk about baseball in itself. Is without knowing the details of it, you have 9 players on a team. Most people would understand you have these 9 players, and each one of them plays a role. I know as a coach, it seemed like I did run into situations to where, as a youth coach, I didn't have everybody show up. So sometimes I had to play with 8 players and 7 players, and it always seemed the ball was hit to that one spot that I didn't have the player. And it was okay to do for one game. I could handle that for one game and try to find a way to overcome it. Defensively, is you only have, let's say, 7 players out there. But when you bat, the way that works is they get an automatic strikeout, which just, if you have the bases loaded or something, you just, that person that normally would have batted, they're considered out. It's not like you skip over them and the next person gets to bat. Ran into the same thing with youth basketball is playing with 4 players for a period of time. And you can do that, like I say, for a short period of time, but typically it cannot be sustained over a long period of time. So the analogy I would use, what's happening with, we have this thing happening in Kentucky, and it's happened over the past 5 years. The number of devices and types of devices is going up at this rate. The amount of technology staff is doing this. It's going down. This and this, and I'll show this graph, and that's not a good combination. Something's going to give when you're doing that. So in the baseball analogy, I would say instead of having 9 players, most districts just have 2 of the positions that just have fielded on defense. They have the pitcher, someone's got to throw the ball to the batter, and they usually have a catcher, someone's got to catch it. Some don't even have a catcher, by the way. So some has a pitcher getting it, he's going to the backstop, picking it up, and walking back with it. And we know no matter how good that pitcher and catcher are, is normally you can't overcome that. Even if you have the best pitcher and catcher in the United States, typically over a long period of time, or even in that one game, you cannot be successful with just 2 of the 9 positions that you're trying to field. The other analogy I would use is the Lucille Ball episode, to where, and some of you may be so young, you'd say, who's Lucille Ball? But this is an iconic part. She's working in a candy factory. And there's a conveyor belt that's bringing the candy. And first of all, her role is to take the candy, it's kind of like a Hershey Kiss kind of thing, and wrap it and put it in this container. And when they first come through, it's coming at a really slow pace. And she's going, well, this is no problem. I can keep up with this. I'm wrapping it. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, the number of those candies comes faster and faster. And so, I'd encourage you, if you've never seen it, to do a Google on it. But you'll see Lucy at some point, instead of wrapping them, she's stuffing them in her face. So she's got a mouthful of Hershey Kisses. She's throwing them down her shirt, put them in her sleeves, because she just can't, she's overwhelmed. She can't keep up with that. We're having the same thing happen in Kentucky schools and across the nation, to be honest with you. Is we typically have the superintendents most usually recognize they need a pitcher, and that pitcher is usually a technician. They recognize they need at least one of those. What they probably don't recognize is how many of those types of positions they need and how overloaded they are, and they're getting to a point to where they can't put it even in their mouth and in their shirt, and they're going to start dropping on the floor, and things are going to give, which is it's a natural type of thing. So the purpose of us doing this study and these recommendations with district input, this is not a KD says you got to do, this is not a KD mandate. I've been in this role for 25 years. These are words of wisdom that we're providing guidelines to all the school districts and the superintendents and school boards across the Kentucky. But I can also tell you across the nation they're interested in this report. Is my peers in every other state is anxious to what we come out with, because this is something that's facing every K through 12 organization in the United States, these types of things that we're discussing. And this study has never been done. This will be the first in U.S. history to this depth. And so I call them, in previous webcasts, I call them dads along the fence. When I coached all these years, you always have those dads, and I'm sure you don't have them in Russell County, that are along the fence, and they got all the solutions for everything. What should be done, not done, but you can't get any of those dads to coach the actual sport. They like to criticize without responsibility. And so, you know, this will have some of the dads along the fence, I'm sure.
Well, the record reflect you're saying that, not me.
Right. And I got those of 20 years lined up of dads, and there's moms on the fence there too, by the way. They're just not dads, but I use that analogy a lot. Some of this effort is just to educate the superintendents and boards, because I don't think most of them recognize they need 9 players on the field. And the other part is that I want to educate them on, I don't think they recognize the impacts of not having a full team and the risks that their team runs by keeping doing this without addressing the people side of this. I find this at almost every level, whether it be federal funds, state funds, local funds. There's always money to buy the stuff, but it's a fight to get the people to operate the stuff, maintain the stuff. The blind spot that most people have, they're outside the technology industry. They don't recognize buying the stuff is only 20% of the cost. The other 80% is maintaining it and making sure it's maximized. It's kind of like, I'm a father of 4. And even when you get a puppy, the puppy is great. My daughter, who's a teacher in Christian County, just got a puppy. But that puppy's way beyond just getting it. You got to feed it now for the next X number of years as you do your children and maintain it. Technology is the same type of thing. Unless you have the people side dealt with the other 80%, that 20% investment is probably not going to be very successful. But it is a blind spot that I find most at the federal, the state, and even locally. They're interested in doing great things with kids. They're on board with technology can make that difference. What they're not recognizing is you need a people side of that to make sure that investment is maximized, and maximized in 2 regards. One, it's reliable. It's up and available to them. But also, I know Heather Worrell met with a group of, was it superintendent CIOs? I know we got Heather here and got you guys excited about that.
Green River Regional Education
That's right.
Cooperative last week.
You're cooperative, got you guys pumped up. But there's a people side of it to making sure that investment that is maximized by teachers understanding how to use it in instruction. And typically you call those digital learning coaches, technology integration specialists, and they can be either that's the role, you have a teacher playing that role within your district. We see that model that's occurring. We even see some of the student technology leadership program, besides maintaining it, we see some of them have expanded to where those students are helping teachers understand how to use it in the instructional process because they understand it. So there's a variety of ways to address that. But like I say, it's a blind spot that we're finding most people have. And the example I would give is our IT Academy that we started like a year and a half ago. Is I would think Microsoft would say, without putting them too much on the spot, it's the most successful one in the United States. We're achieving year 5 results in year 1. With the number of professional certifications that students received and the amount of courses they took. We reached the 5-year mark. And you say, why is that? It's because we insisted on having a person, when an initiative came up, just not buying the courses, but having a person to lead it. That has made the difference. Laura Raganas, as most of you know, she's part of our digital learning team. Although she would be too humble to say this, I credit her for the success of reaching out, connecting with districts, her enthusiasm in going out with districts. Without that, we would achieve the results of every other state. And I got to tell you, it was a battle allowing part of that funding to be used for the people side of it. I know when I spoke with the Henderson County superintendent about the results of this, she talked about slowly phasing in the positions, not just one or the roles, but over a period of time. She also recognized with her technology staff that they were getting to a breaking point. They were getting to the Lucy point. They couldn't keep up. And most of the folks involved with education are willing to accept less pay than the corporate sector because they love education. I know I love it. I mean, it's you know, my mom's a teacher, my kids are in the teaching business, so you're willing to do that, accept less pay. But there's a part to where you get overwhelmed and frustrated. We say, I could earn 3 to 4 times in the private sector. Even though I like this, I can't keep up. And you're not going to let it just fall and crumble and crash. And so she had reached that point in Henderson County. She was afraid she was going to lose her technology leader. And so she did hire someone else. She recognized that they were at that kind of breaking point. And I know you deal with that a lot of different things. I mean, just not technology. That's going on. We talked about ahead of time.
Right.
It's these teachers, I know the hours they work, and the principals, the hours they work. It's enormous. But you as the head coach and superintendent are trying to say, when am I overwhelming them? When are they overrun? Because we know just human nature is that you can only sustain that for a certain period of time. Sure. It's just natural here. So I'm looking for, as we travel, just trying to get superintendent's feedback. I for the most part recognize this is a slowly but surely process. I don't think the results of this study immediately mean all these roles are going to be filled and you're going to get everything you need. But I do know it needs to be done. There needs to be a starting place sometime to try to address this. And I'm trying to avoid the situation where something just collapses. I do know the pace that we're going at this and this, it is going to collapse at a certain point. There's going to be things that break. I can tell it talking with district staff, and I can do this from the KD role that the district staff can't do with their superintendents. I can say they're getting ready to do the Lucy. They can't keep up with it anymore. And it's getting ready to fall, and they're giving their best effort. They're working tremendously late at night and over the weekends with no really additional pay, but they can't keep up with it any longer. So part of it is just educating the superintendents, and at some point the superintendents and boards may say, we're willing to accept the risk. But the part that I want them to take in consideration is I do see a few superintendents that are kind of being harsh with their technology staff and not recognizing they've not put them in a place to be successful. They only have 2 players of the 9. They're overloaded. And at least make them aware of the things that are starting to collapse and having problems, or your investment is not being maximized, is mainly due to the strategy, not to the people that you have on the ground. In my 25 years, there are 2 things that I think have been a near total wasted investment in Kentucky. There's a lot of things we've maximized. The 2 areas that we have nearly wasted the money is electronic whiteboards and high-end video conferencing systems. It's not because the technology is bad. In fact, the technology is absolutely awesome in all those. It's the people side of it's not being addressed. Is when the electronic boards go inside the classrooms, there's lots of excitement. There's usually some initial professional development, but usually by year 3 and 4 is the teachers have changed. They come from another district that didn't have that particular type of device, and the new teacher is not trained in that electronic whiteboard. And guess what happens? Guess what happens? Do they use it or not use it? They don't use it. It just sits there. A very high percentage of electronic whiteboards, if you take a look in Kentucky, are not being used at all. In fact, I can tell they're putting pieces of paper, taping it on top of this very expensive piece of technology. Same thing happened with the 2-way video conferencing centers. It was the people side of it that was not put in place. So at what point with all these are we going to start dealing with the people side? But also my recommendation to superintendents will be stop buying the stuff or start taking it out. Until you do this maxing of the number of people you need with the technology that you have in place. And the devices, and I can see that from your all's feedback that you provided, it came out, and I'll hit on that a little bit more. It's not just buying computers. Chris, what are all the things you're involved with now? It's just not computers. There's
computers, projectors, telephones, even the HVAC systems.
Security,
somewhat.
Cameras. And so those are devices that have been added, but the technology staffs have not. And this district is an example of, I could see, everyone faced this back in 2008 when the housing market hit. We could see the number of technology positions drop. That was natural. And that happened here. But we've also seen since that time the devices go up. And those are just the devices and just traditional ones. It's not counting all the other ones that you just mentioned. And so when I sat in the Region 2 does a great job at the KISTI event. I don't know if you sit in that one, Chris, but I always encourage, this is a plug for Steve Gum and crew with that event. They talk about what things are going on at the technical level. And it's just eye-opening. The types of things that those folks are trying to make happen with such limited staff. But I can tell they're at a breaking point. This is all getting ready to be at a breaking point. And here's the other thing that happens. I'll use another sports analogy, an A player. These are top players. When you lose an A player and you replace them by a D player, do you get the same results immediately? Typically not, right? Sure. You have to work, just like in coaching, over a period of time trying to bring that D up to an A, and some can't even do that, but you try to do that over a period of time. We have A players in these positions across the state, If they leave, the district's going to have a very difficult time finding another A player to take their place. And typically what you find is they got to hire 3 or 4 B players or C players to try to do that, and they don't have the money to do that. So it's the balance of the two. So we're trying to encourage superintendents. I think most of them have A players in these types of positions, but we're reaching a point with all this, with the explosion of it and the great uses of it, of the people side of it, that's not being addressed. So we have a couple of questions that we ask superintendents. It's simple ones that I saw from your all's responses. This is not a survey that Katie, the agency, is going to do. This is more so 2 ways. The superintendent can either ask these questions in their head and say, if all my teachers and students and parents answer this, how would they answer it? Or you can give out a formal survey to do that. I know we have the TEL survey that's going on now, so that'll give you somewhat of feedback. That's the working conditions survey of all teachers across the state. We do Bright Bites. We have X number of districts. I don't think you guys are a Bright Bites district here, but we have a variety of other techniques that are free out there, which you can get the feedback on. And Katie's not going to get into the audit business of doing those, but they'll give you something. So the simple one is just reliable. If your teachers, you ask all your students and teachers within your district, how reliable is what you have in place? Would they give that a thumbs up or down? What percentage of that would be? And I know one of the frustrations of doing any survey, and the TEL survey, is how did it work this week? Not how did it work over the course of the year. If it broke down this week, there's a tendency to go, well, it was broke. So I know at the TEL survey, we're trying to keep everything up and reliable as all these teachers are taking it, because there's a tendency to say, how did it work this week, not over a period of time. But just over the period of time, how well would your teachers and students and teachers and students and the rest of the staff say it was reliable? Number 2, if you took the same question to say, are we maximizing this in the instructional process and the administrative process? Are we getting our big bang for the buck for all this is just not a hardware thing, this is hardware, software, and electronic services, is typically we ask all the EdTech leaders across state and superintendents, if you wrote out everything you're doing in education technology, how many things would you say you're maximizing, how many things would you say you're not? The things you're not, do you need to keep on doing those? Or do you need to find a way to maximize this? For example, electronic whiteboards. That's a tremendous investment that districts have made. You're not maximizing. So the question is, do you just take them down, or do you do something like, try to do some professional development with your new teachers that have come and gone since you deployed them to try to address that and put it in place. The third question has to deal with data quality. I would find this is true just not in Kentucky, but across the United States. I really feel K-12, and I've studied this in depth, in the private sector, even the government sector, is the last kind of organization structure that really hasn't addressed these roles, particularly on data quality. In the corporate sector and in most government sectors, they have a person within the organization that is the air traffic controller for all data systems and making sure they're being maximized and the data elements are of high quality. We basically do not have that in K-12. And therefore, the quality of the data that's collected and used within the district, and then also rolled up to the state and the federal level, any level, is not of high quality. And so it's my view, unless that is addressed, the expectation should be very low in the quality of the data that we are collecting, particularly with certain data elements that are put in place. I'm also going to ask folks to take a close look at the influencers. I'm going to get ready to go through that on the chart that we have in place. Have we identified the right influencers that up the number of roles that we need and the percentage of time that people spend in those roles? I know we spent a lot of time with that on the table, but it wasn't in depth. I want to circle that again to make sure we have the influencers that are right, that are in place. I also want to try to get to the point of having something that's interactive, meaning every district can do this themselves. They can say, this is what we have. These are the roles that we don't have filled, and the ones we have filled, this is the percentage of them not being filled or filled. And here's the risk and impacts of us not doing that. And just so the superintendent's aware of that. It does 2 things. It lets you know the blind spots that the district has. But also I think it stops the beat down that we're having in certain districts of their technology staff because they just don't have enough and they're doing the best that they can. But I think either one of those is a good type of thing to put in place. So let's bring up the model right now. And these are the things that was shown during the digital Learning Summit. You can go ahead to the next one. And these are the questions that we asked. If you just asked in your mind, and got a quick thumbs up or down, just do a mental thing of it, your superintendent in your district, or you actually do it in a formalized way. I can tell you that those districts that are participating in some kind of survey of their parents and students in particular, along with their teachers, are finding it's easier to make the case to address the people side, because they recognize the way this is playing out from the students to teachers, not how they thought it was playing out at the district level or the board level. And so it gives them ammunition, if you will, is to address the people side of the issue. So if you just had to have that, said those in your head, and once again, I do want to emphasize, no one from KD is going to do an audit. We're not in the audit business. There's a lot of people that, at least our technology office, is not going to do that. We do have a technology impact review tool that is kind of a self-assessment that you want to do your district, or you have a fellow district do it of you. We have there's a variety of tools out there that can get a handle on this. So let's go on to the next one. Those are the three questions we asked. This is what I was talking about. This is live data that we're seeing from the state of Kentucky. And you can see we're really no longer having to make the case of the importance of education technology. It's taking care of itself. What we're having is this issue of the technology people is dropping. The responsibilities is dropping. And so this is one of those ones to where maybe it blows up in 3 or 4 years. And this is a David Zieglerism for those that knew David Ziegler that passed away on our staff. He says, sometimes you're right too early. And people just can't grasp it until it really happens. This is one of the ones that's it's going to happen with certainty. It's going to happen. It may not happen this year. It may happen the next and next. But something's got to do, because we cannot continue at this pattern here. Either you got to deal with the people side, or you got to reduce the devices. One of the two. Or your expectations should be very low of reliability of that in the classroom, and it's being maximized. Either you got just that expectation. Let's go to the next one. We used, there's results of this that we have that have models. We picked X number of districts that we did the model of this just to see what it would do. I would encourage every district that's watching today to try to do it and see what your district would be. Plug it in for the roles, plug it in and take the influencers and see how that would play out within your organization. And this is not, when we're talking about roles, we're not really talking about FTEs either. Because typically the smaller the district, and I know you have multiple people in a role, it's just not one person. They're wearing 10 different hats. But even that one person, at some point, they can't wear all the hats and do it effectively. Everyone has that limitation of putting it in place. So we also take a look at library media specialists, for example, sitting right here in a library. There's a librarian here? Okay, that's okay. That's okay. I just want to be cautious of what I'm saying, in a library with a librarian around. Because they have books they can throw and other things they can throw in here at me. But we're actually seeing one of the things suggested is expanding their role into helping out with maximizing the digital side of these tools in the instructional process. And we've seen that recommendation. Is that one of the things with existing staff that you could expand, but how overwhelmed are they with their day-to-day job already? And that's always the balance that you will have with all these going in place. Once again, I mentioned earlier, I know you have the Teacher Leader of the Year in technology here in this district, and what role could folks like him and others play? And I know in Floyd County, there's a technique that they use with, they don't have necessarily formalized digital learning coaches, but they do have folks within the schools that the district has identified that they pay a stipend. And I understand you do pay a stipend here to your STCs, which is unique. It's a good
Every
unique.
school has a school technology coordinator that receives a stipend.
That's a good unique going in place. We did look at Gardner. Gardner is considered the Consumer Reports of the technology industry. And Gardner, just on a rough basis, said 4% of all the staff you have should be education technology staff. That's just a rough guideline. We ran that, and I don't think any district comes close to that. And that's a pretty conservative type of thing that we're doing, putting in place. And typically, K-12 and higher ed, it has a lot less resources, a lot less technology folks. But this was on the educational side and the governmental side. So we're finding, and because you all love Gardner, in this case you may actually love what they said, is we can take that and push that across the state to show you how few people you have compared to their recommended model. Let's go to the next one. So let's talk about this model some to make sure that you understand it, because we had I could tell some of the CIOs this was the first time they actually looked at it within the event. So I want to highlight some of the parts here. You see the different roles that we have here. So besides the questions that we asked, you saw the 3 questions, do we have it right? Do we have the roles right? And do we have the influencers on the roles? So let me make sure I describe what an influencer is. An influencer means you probably have to have more people doing that or more of their time doing that. The more you're on that up arrow is you probably have to have more people and more time spent doing these kind of roles. When you go down, it lessens the number of people and their percentage of time that they have to deal with that. So I'm going to go back to what I see happening across the state. Is most of the superintendents understand they have to have that lead technician. One, in their mind they know they got to have a pitcher. And we know just with pitchers, a pitcher, no matter how dynamic they are, can only pitch so many pitches during the game and can't pitch 30 straight games in a row without someone taking their place. It wears out their arm. They just don't have the capacity to do that. They're overloaded in doing that. So a lot of districts have a star pitcher. They have one, and it's typically in the lead technical role. And this is not a political statement. There's no one to the left of that position. You see the data leader, the air traffic controller, and the CIO, or to the right of that position in most districts. And that is like having no outfielders, no first baseman, and no third baseman. That's the equivalent of you have a pitcher, and the pitcher may have a catcher, may have one more technician in the district. But that's it. And once again, if you take a look at the size, and these are just rough kind of numbers that we got, and this is not pie in the sky stuff. This is very conservative numbers that we're putting in place. We do find that lead technician, the more they are covered up with just trying to keep the lights on, the less likely they are going to the left side of that. So they're not doing the CIO roles. So what that means to me in that position, that means really the superintendent must play the CIO role. So they're really supposed to be considering total cost of ownership with technology, the strategic process. And I do find a lot of technicians or folks leading it in the CIO want to play more of the CIO role, but they can't because they are so overwhelmed just keeping the lights on. And this is the other thing I saw from your all's feedback, is you can't be innovative hardly about anything. I'm not talking about you guys, I'm talking about overall, because you're so consumed with keeping the lights on. And so if you take a look at any kind of company or large government organization, or even small, they take a look at the technology that we have, what are we maximizing, what are we not, but they also take a look at emerging technology and say what parts of emerging technology should we implement or should we wait on a period of time. Well, if you're consumed with keeping the lights on, is you can't even be looking at those other types of things. And we find that is what's happening, is they can't be focusing on making really the big instructional impact with these types of things. And here's the other kind of thing I would tell you. I'm a former Army officer, and we have something called combined arms. And what that meant is all the parts of the Army, the artillery, the infantry, the armor, when they all work together, they're called what we call a combat multiplier. You can achieve a whole lot more by them working as a team together than them individually going off and doing their own thing. I feel technology can be an educational multiplier, which means when all different parts of it are working together, the instructional, the technical, the administrative, you can achieve great things faster than normal. And I would also use this analogy. The studies show a horse can, let's say, carry 100 pounds or pull 100 pounds. I'm just going to use 100 pounds just to do the math to keep it equal. So an individual horse can only pull 100 pounds. But if they're teamed with another horse, they can carry that 100 pounds plus another 30. It's multiplied. And if you add a third horse to whatever they're pulling, it's even more. So when you have the different aspects of these parts working together, you can achieve things that you normally couldn't achieve in silos. And so what we're saying from this, the diagram that we have, is not all these reports that these people necessarily report to the CIO. In certain districts, it may not be happening. But there's someone that's got to make sure they're all working together, kind of like in a band or orchestra. You got to make sure all those instruments are working together just in silo. This is the same type of thing. You got to make sure these individual components, the instructional technology, the administrative technology, the pure technology, is working together versus individually. and alone. The other thing that we found, if you take a look at the diagram, is these are, once again, I want to make sure when you look at it, these are not FTE positions, these are roles. And it is possible that you have one person in this district playing all these roles. If you got a tiny district, maybe they're playing every role. Are they able to do that well? And going back to the more devices they have, and the bigger the district and the more buildings they have, the less likely they are going to be successful in doing all those roles. Something's going to give. So we're finding what's giving is these aren't being done. Digital learning coaches aren't being put in place, or the equivalent of that. So the investment is not being maximized during the initial implementation of technology and during the ongoing implementation of technology. The technicians are being overwhelmed with this explosion. You do have a lead technician, and they understand it's got to be full-time, but they don't understand they probably need more technicians and maybe a third of their time or half their time based upon whatever their workload is. The data leader for a district, overall data leader, that's not occurring. And the CIO is pretty much not occurring across the state. So let's talk about the influencers to make sure we have those correct. So when you have a big project going on, a brand new project that involves technology in some kind of way, is typically their time is taken away from doing these type of things. Let's say you have a brand new school building, and you're trying to consider all the technology components of that new building. That's a good example to use. Well, someone's got to be staying on top of that on a daily basis, along with their normal day job. We find what normally happens with big projects. People are trying to do both their day job and project management. Something gives on one of those two. The day job either drops or the project drops, and it has big problems later on. Older equipment, and this is the age of them, or donations. Good intentions of people giving older equipment to school districts, but from folks like in Chris's role, that is very problematic. It's tough to make those run. Typically, they're all different types of brands, and the average person outside the technology field doesn't understand the difficulty of one computer made by company B is not the same as company C. They're different. Their components are different. Their setup's different. It takes time to understand how to maximize every different kind of vendor that you have. That's why you do see in corporate America is when they buy a computer for their company, they buy one brand, and one brand only. Because they recognize in their technology staff they can't keep up with it. And you'll find in corporate America they do not take donated computers. No matter how good the cause of them doing that, they're more likely to break down and have problem issues when your technology staff is already small. B and C players. So if you're a district that has a lot of B and C players, you're going to need more of those to address those three questions and keep it up and reliable and maximized. We talked about Chris earlier. The more the folks in Chris's role are doing the heating air conditioning systems, security camera systems, the electronic whiteboards, the less effective they're going to be. It's the more devices. It's the Lucy factor. So what drives those down? Well, if you're using cloud-based services. So the less widgets that you're turning and using a cloud provider, and you're brokering the service versus turning the widgets, you need less of those positions and less of their time spent on those. If you're using shared services, some of those we provide at KDE, reduces that. Standardization of the products I'm talking about, the A players, the Student Technology Leadership Program is another thing. They give a plug to our STLP State Championship. Two things I want to say is STLP has grown by 40% in Kentucky over the past 2 years. 40. That's 40% more kids that are participating in the past 2 years. And Jeff Sabelski, who leads that for us, I think I saw this right, we have 1,300 more folks from schools that will be at our state championship this year at Rupp Arena on April 11th. That's just phenomenal type of growth. So there's a win-win for districts that have STLP, the Student Technology Leadership, their help desk. Their help desk can both help out with the break-fix issues that are happening in the classroom, to help out with reliability, and also help out with that digital learning kind of coach responsibility or role to help teachers how to maximize it within their instruction. The part we're interested in you all giving us feedback on, have we captured all the right influencers and all the right roles? So the two ones that popped up as roles you say we didn't capture is security and project management. You felt those should be the role by themselves. And so we'll debate whether we add that as an influencer, because typically I think in most districts the technicians are playing the role of security. But I don't think what most districts are aware of, most superintendents and boards, are how much of their time it takes to do that role. So we'll go back and forth and talk about whether we do that. This is your chance to give us input in doing that. And so let us know, and please take a close look at it. Like I say, we're in the concept stage of this. This is the first time in the U.S. that this has been done, and trying to make sure we've addressed the right area. So let me give you some of the feedback that you all gave, and I'll pick some different tables. And Chris thinks these are not all Chris's responses, so don't say, well, what is Chris doing saying all this stuff? So Chris, none of these are your responses, all right? But you can say some in your mind. Yes, I believe those things. There was genuine surprise amongst the tables, some of the tables, that this was something that the districts asked Katie to do on your all's behalf, versus something Katie is saying, thou shalt. So I want to reemphasize that again. You all told us you're being overwhelmed. I agree you are. So we are doing this to try to respond to that, versus it being a mandate. I got no mandate behind it. This is just like words of wisdom and guidelines that we have for districts going forward. The data lead was confounding for the table. They said we need to find something else to call that. Overall data air traffic controller. We know most districts, their data is completely siloed. The infinite campus person is infinite campus. The Munis person is Munis. And across all the other data systems, they're not really talking with each other, and they're not really seeing how their data relates between data systems, as most companies and most government organizations, no matter what their size, typically have those types of roles within the organization. They did talk about the difficulty with superintendents and boards, talking about the digital learning coaches, technology integration specialists, TRTs. You know, I know the part that we talked about is the funding, it's balance that you have. There'll be two aspects of this, I think, with superintendents. One is I recognize we need these roles, but also what funds them, and what gives, or do I accept the risk? Would that be right?
Absolutely. And I made note as you were talking, David. I think it's important to point out that oftentimes the source of fund that you can use to purchase a device is totally separate than the source of fund that you could use to pay for a technician to take care of that device.
Right.
So you may have a pot of money that affords a district or a board the opportunity to purchase devices, or a principal the opportunity to purchase devices, but that doesn't equal out over here on this other pot that may be deficient to supply the person that's going to keep those devices up and running.
Right.
And so that goes back to, well, maybe the decision is you don't purchase those.
Right.
And that may very well be.
Yeah. And
I think another part that's important to bring out, and Mr. Bell reminds me of this frequently, it's always important that your CIO is at the table with the principals, with the instructional supervisors, with the curriculum coaches, when you're looking at products, learning platforms, Odysseyware, whatever you're talking about, so they can put input on what that's going to take. Number one, do we have machines that are currently able to meet the minimum spec requirements, right? Maybe they're not. Maybe we want to buy the best program ever, but we don't have the infrastructure to support it.
Right.
That's number one.
Yeah.
So all those things, Mr. Bell would rather handle those on the front side than here you go, Chris, it's not working.
Right.
Fair?
Yes.
Absolutely.
It is. Right on the mark.
So those are types of things that Mr. Bell, and rightfully so, he needs to constantly remind us. It's not everybody has to be integrated, and everybody has to be sitting at the table making that decision. But at the end of the day, when it comes to devices, when it comes to staff, absolutely. If we had more money, we would support it, as would all superintendents would. Right. But you also have to look at efficiency. And I think what you're describing in the role of technology is it's not a bubble isolated to just technology. Right. Our teachers have that. Yes. Our administrators have that. Right. Our maintenance, our food service. Yeah. It's education as a whole. Yes. Everybody's in that red line. That's right. That's right. Yes. Everybody's in that red line. They are. And I appreciate your approach and being an advocate for the staff. But I think in the midst of all of this, because let's be realistic, where's the money going to come from? Right. I mean, it's going to have to come from something else. There's no extra going to come.
Or you stop doing it.
Or you stop doing it, and you look at efficiency.
Yes.
You look at efficiency also. And so, are you maximizing all the time, all effort that you're putting with it?
I really like the point you made about folks in Chris's role being at the table.
Absolutely.
So you hit that on it, and we find that's happening pretty often. They're not part of it. Yeah. So we always say there's 3 or 4 triggers that anytime you say these words, you need to have that person involved as early on. Anything that anything the internet comes up in the instruction, connecting the internet, Chris's role needs to be involved. I'll just do my mom's role. Anything involved with electricity is probably, they need to be involved in the conversation in some way, because typically it connects with some kind of, the technology that's being put out there. Would you say that's true in your case? So, we try to, even digital is another one of those areas of the word digital, where digital comes up. Data, voice and video, those words come up. Involve them early, because typically the folks in Chris's role get involved after you bought it. And they're thinking, well, I need to involve my technology person after I bought it or selected what I want.
And then make it work.
And then make it work.
Make it work. Yeah.
And then a lot of times there's a problem with making it work, or they bought the really wrong, spent the time and energy on the wrong type of thing. You all gave a lot of feedback on and once again, this is not necessarily all the roles will report to the CIO. Every district is different, but I do think there needs to be someone coordinating all those roles that are putting in place. The next steps that will occur, they say, well, Dave, what are you going to do with this information? Well, much like today, and I think Region 1 did this, I met with them, is let's refine it. Meet as a group and say, are we identifying all the right areas? I'm going to meet one-on-one with groups of superintendents to say, have I identified the right area, and am I using the right approach so you just don't throw me out the door? We're also going to ask the Gardner Corporation to take a look at our study results, review it, and ideally endorse it, because it gives the credibility and it gives the stamp of approval of someone that does this on large scale across the United States. They did that for our data quality study. So that's the choice that's the technique that we're going to put in place. A lot of you have suggestions about the words that we're using to describe the big questions. So we'll take a look at those words. Marty, no cut on you. This is Marty Park, who's our Chief Digital Officer. The kids making stuff, there was great pushback on people understanding that. And you may stay, hardcore in saying that we got to keep that and put that in place. But I think there's a combination of all those. We are going to once again provide the summary of this across the feedback we got during the CIO Summit. Chris, so do you have any final words of wisdom, or the board members? We have your board members here from your all's point of view, and you find yourself in a similar situation other districts do. So this is not unique to you all, but we're finding an alarming thing is going to get ready to happen if it's not addressed. So from a superintendent to me is talking with your peers across the state. What words of wisdom would you have as I go across?
Well, I think number one, you have to look at efficiency. And I think when you talked about the number of different devices, because Chris Mr. Bell oftentimes reminds us, cheaper is not always better.
That's right. That's right.
You may get a great deal on this type of device, but the time it takes, number one, for them to have to man it and keep it up and running. Number two, it may not be compatible across everything that we need it to be compatible. So you end up still, that may work for this, but it may not work for that. So those are things that he has to, and sometimes on the administrative side, principals have limited budgets at schools, and they want to maximize their efficiency on what they're looking at. But at the same time, Chris has to look at that big picture of making everything work on that. And so just those conversations back and forth, and there is some give and take in there's some give and take in that. But I think the biggest part we've got to look at is again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. I don't think any superintendent would say no, that department doesn't deserve more staff. Certainly they do, but it's the ability to fund that.
Right.
And also when you look at employment, that's a recurring cost, right? You might not buy X amount of computers every single year, but once you hire someone, that's a recurring cost every single year. So all those things have to be factored into budgets.
Right.
And May comes up another budget time. We'll be talking about budgets again with our board members. So understaffed, Chris will be the first one to tell you that he is. Sure he is. And probably every department in the state and probably the nation is, and you were unfortunately one of those districts that have went this way from the number of staff that he used to have to work to what he is. And one of his was a technician is in the classroom teaching now. Yeah. And there for a X amount of time, he was a department of One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons I do this is if you don't, I'll just give you an example of the data study. One of the reasons we did that, people were stomping up and down saying, why isn't this certain data element we have 100% accurate? So I just told them, you've got to have 5 things in place to have it accurate. So stop stomping up and down because you've not addressed these 5 things. The same thing with the technology part. If you get really angry, if the average person watching from the stand or the dads along the fence doesn't understand, you got to have outfielders. You got to have a third baseman. They're furious. They're saying, why are we getting beat 100-0 in the first inning? Because they don't understand you got to have other players in there. So some of this is just an educational part. There's a reason why it's not being maximized. Or your teachers, and I did get this from your feedback. A lot of you are worried about the telesurvey results across the state. You're worried that your teachers are going to say it's not, they're not getting the PD, it's going to go down, and it's not reliable. And people are going to start stomping up and down. Well, the technology is bad. The technology is working as it should. The people side has not been addressed. It's electronic whiteboards, all those in place. So it's just an educational effort. So if nothing else, I want to stop the unfair beatdown. At least, being a coach is you have game film. And you want to see, what went bad and what caused that. And why didn't something good happen that I thought was going to happen? And my son was a quarterback of the youth team and he got sacked. Now, there's 2 reasons. As a dad, I didn't like the way he getting, tackled from the back. But I said, who let their man through? And they said, not me, coach. And I said, well, the film doesn't lie. It's going to show just not one player, but typically 2 or things broke down. So in this carry, it's just not one thing. It's 3 or 4 things that are breaking down. And at some point, it's going to be a bad experience. And so then either they're going to blame the technology being bad or the limited amount of people they have not doing what they should do. So I do want to eliminate that, just like them stomping up and down about the bad data element. Since we've done that study, as I circle right back to that and go, this is why this is not working. The same thing will happen when a certain district is not maximizing it. A superintendent comes to me, which they have, and said, I don't think my district's tech staff is taking care of business like they should. I'm going to use this to educate them on you don't have a full team in place. And in fact, they're doing heroic types of things to keep what they have in place. They're not letting you down. So if I get anything out of that, but it probably has to come from me to superintendents, I know that, versus someone in their district doing that. And that's my intention to just try to educate folks on it. So I'm counting on you to be in the audience when I'm there and support me a little bit, at least when I'm in front of your cooperative. Greg is yours, right? Yes. So in fact, I got one. But I do want to hear the balance of it because I do think this is, my daughter's teacher works long hours, principals, crazy hours that a principal works during the course of the year to try to keep things going. And I don't think the general public probably does get appreciation for how hard people in K-12 are working, right. The hours that they're putting in above and beyond. It is extraordinary. And so, once again, being a father of some teachers and I know a lot of principals and superintendents, I know the hours that are put in to make it try to be a special environment for kids. But I appreciate you letting me spend some time with this webcast. I know we had 20% of the EdTech leaders that weren't there. I wanted to cover it. But I could tell from your all's feedback, I need to cover some other points. I do think this is an important time. And I do want to get this part of it right. This won't be a one-time document. I imagine it'll evolve over the period of time, trying to get it right. But I think it's worth it at bat. And some of you may say, no matter what you do, it's not going to be addressed, but I'm one that, using once again a baseball term, I want to give it a couple swings and try to see what I can do to try to change it. So I'm willing to try to do that. So thanks for enduring that, giving your feedback.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. And we have a supportive board here too. I know
Absolutely.
they'll support me in that too. So I think I was saying some things that
a lot of
connected
support
with
online
it.
too.
All right. So what came up?
A lot of people agree with you, stressing the need to get this word out to superintendents sooner rather than later. Budgets are going to, you mentioned earlier, budgets are May. Some boards are already working on their budgets, so needing to get that message out. The creativity of, some districts as far as using students as SCLP students and things like that to do some of the technology work. Most of it, a little bit of debate over your electronic whiteboards, and every time you bring that up, there's always a little bit of debate. And I don't think you can put anybody into one bucket. There's areas where things are done very well, and training goes against them. So I don't think we're seeing anything against electronic whiteboards if they're used well.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, that's a good. It's like I said, the technology is outstanding, and I know there's sensitivity to it because there's been a great investment in it. But if I had to pick something that has not been maximized. And as I travel the state, is I see a very high percentage of them not used, particularly at the older grade levels, not necessarily the elementary grade levels. So I'm not saying it's 100% broke. You definitely don't give examples of it, but I think those are good examples, and I've seen it enough over a period of time to where after the initial implementation, it drops tremendously on it being maximized in the classroom.
A good analogy, if you double the number of buses, do you increase the number of mechanics? And usually
Yeah.
the answer is,
So, Randy Poe, the superintendent of Boone County, one of the reasons we're doing this too, I think it's a chance to make the point. He says, I have a formula, I have a way to do every other position in the district except technology. And he didn't even know we're doing this. I said, oh, by the way, we are coming up with something that will give you, some leverage points to it. So you're right, it's worth making that point, and they do have it they recognize you can't buy 100 more buses or you have this increase without addressing the people side of it.
Right.
Yeah.
it'll be good feedback for us.
Okay. Can you do the Go Soapbox results on those?
Want the second one first?
Yeah, do the second one first. So we asked them if this is going to be their thoughts on what we have here. So hopefully, 47% of you, hopefully that can make a slowly but surely change. And even the second percent, don't give up hope. There's always chance for a comeback and to address it. And I think, especially if it's phrased in the approach of we're not trying to address it all at one time, but over a period of time. But I think we're not. So I appreciate that feedback. Let's just go ahead and bring the first one up too. While we're here with the STLP before we go on to another topic. STLP State Championship, Rupp Arena, April 12th. So the ones watching, we got 75%. And even if your district doesn't have it, I encourage you to come and take a look at that event. It is spectacular. Kentucky Educational Television, KET, highlighted it for an hour last year on their Education Matters show. I guess it was last April that it was filmed. It was shown in May. And if you got to see it to believe it. And once again, we've had a 40% increase in amount of students in Kentucky that are participating in our regional and state events, and just the amount of students now participating in the state event and the adults, because mainly a volunteer organization, is phenomenal. And hats off to all the districts and the folks that are leading that, and also Jeff Sabelski. Is doing just fabulous work there. So look forward to seeing you. Allow me to give a plug there. Thanks. Dee Dee, I wanted to hit on let's go through the director and chief's update. So,
All right.
Chief Data Officer.
A few reminders. I don't think anything's going to be brand new, but April 10th, the school report card profile page will open. So by now you should have already, or by the end of the month, you should have verified schools through the DASSER system, the District and School Collection Repository. So make sure that's been done. If you're not sure and you know of a school that's changed or a principal or superintendent that's changed, you can go online to the school and district directory and see who's enrolls and all that. And if it's wrong there, it has not been verified and corrected. So that gives you a good indication of some work still needing to be done. The 2016-17 school report card will change just a little bit. We're going to limp along one more year with the current school report card, with one exception, and that's going to be you're going to see a new dashboard. You've heard a lot about dashboard. You've heard about the new accountability model. This year will be an opportunity to introduce the school report card through the school report card, the new accountability model. And the accountability tab, as we've known it and looked at it for the last year, that will be gone on the public site. The dashboard that's going to be used is something that the Commissioner Pruitt is out there at town hall meetings. He's showing it. He's getting feedback on it. So we're really trying to keep it simple so that at a snapshot you can kind of see how the school measures up. And it's not about comparing schools to one or the other, and it's not like a lot of big drill down in a dashboard. It's not going to be that complex this first year. It's just an opportunity to introduce people to dashboards and also to the new accountability model. And reminder on the civil rights data collection, that it does close on April 26th. If you've not got somebody in there verifying and that data, You know, they should be. Is that you?
That's me.
All right. Well, we did a whole lot of it for schools
Yes,
this
you
year.
do. It's better every year. I applaud you.
I got the best emails forwarded to me this
Yes.
year saying, no tears this year, less Motrin. My cube
Better
mates are
every year.
happier
Our
with
finance
me.
officer and I are very pleased.
So that is good to hear. It's nice when we can do things one time and
Absolutely.
help all schools and districts,
Yes.
take a burden off of them.
We
So
appreciate that.
any school is Title I, so that means your alternative school, things like that. Don't miss those because last minute we'll be knocking on the door on behalf of federal government saying, hey, they're asking us to remind you to do these too. So make sure that all of them are being addressed. I know we've talked about, the SIT system. What we've known as SITs is really been broken down into two pieces: the instructional management system as well as the educator development suite. Educator development suite is sunsetting. However, we're working on what's going to replace that. But the instructional management system does now have the ACT national data in it, so it's a great resource to be able to see your data. And there's more information on the resources out there. Brian Spellman from KET did some training with us, and that training is recorded and on the SITS training page. The educator effectiveness system RFP is posted, and we hope that see that results from that by mid-April. So that's coming close. Student Voice has closed. We're done with Student Voice for this year. The data is in the Educator Development Suite in SITS. It's also in Infinite Campus. So those reports can be used to see the results of the students' survey information on those teachers. The cloud migration is still progressing well. It's been a very successful. A lot of good work from Infinite Campus leading that effort, and folks at KDE making sure that we, dot all the I's and cross all the T's and make that a smooth transition. We have 127 districts that are complete now. We have 14 that are scheduled to migrate in spring, April, May timeframe, and the rest of them will go over the summer. So that work does still continue. Few training opportunities coming up. Infinite Campus is offering user group meetings throughout the state. This week is Western Kentucky. Next week is Eastern Kentucky and Central Kentucky. So make sure you've got somebody attending those. There's some scheduling training. If you've got new scheduling people, there's some new tools within the scheduling. Make sure that you have people taking advantage of that training. It is free, so there's no cost associated with that, and it is good an opportunity to work, hand in hand with Infinite Campus trainers, even if there's other questions outside of what they're training on. There's some SQL reporting services training. It's going to be offered in Owensboro in April. And then, of course, we have our end-of-year training coming up at the end of April. All the training events are on the KSYS training page on KDE's website. All I had was those reminders. Pretty quick.
So I'll be doing the Chief Security Officer update for Bob Hackworth. Bob's actually giving some training today. Chris, at the end of every year I ask what went well in 2016, what did not go well, what should our goals be for 2017. You identified two areas in security we did well: data security and awareness, right? And less DDoS attacks and network uptime was pretty good. So that's a good lead-in for us to talk about security. Also, you said that the goals should be in 2017 increase the technology funding. So he's trying to help you out there, and we'll need your help with that too, to address the people side of it, and better printer contracts. So what is it in the printer contracts that need to be better?
Well, we're going to start. It seems like, of course, we're pretty much Lexmark. We've tried HP, which is good, but on the HP side, from where we purchased from, the support or the warranty behind that just wasn't, it was horrible trying to get somebody to take care of it or whatever. So, maybe some other options would be good.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that feedback. I get to ask you personally what you meant by that. Now I got it. Good. And this is all about, when we ask that question, is this not the good? We want to understand what we can do better. And that helps us address that. So that's why I'm interested in asking. So let's talk about security. In your summary notes, because when we do the webcast, when we do the agenda for the next webcast, we send you a summary of the previous one. And so the last webcast I talked about when I went to Washington, D.C., some of the information I got, particularly around security, particularly around COSIN. and they're trusted learning environment best practices and examples of evidence of security. So if you go to KD's Best Practice for Data Security webpage by Bob Hackworth, our Chief Data Security Officer, he has a link to those best practices, and also in our summary, you'll see a link if you want to go to those. They're really good ones, and I encourage it. It asks districts 25 questions in regards to security. Are you addressing it? The second one is we're still having, and Kentucky has not been fooled by this, is we have a lot of people that we call phishing emails, which means they're trying to trick you, in other words, to try to give you away your Social Security numbers of your staff. They're pretending to be one of your staff members, and pretending to be the superintendent. That is still occurring. We don't think a Kentucky superintendent or chief financial officer has been fooled yet, but that doesn't mean we got to keep people aware of it, because they're getting better and better about how well they're hiding those. The other new one, a new scam, phish that's happening is these scammers are calling and emailing your vendors, pretending to be you. They will attempt to change your delivery address and then order devices such as laptops, which they will then sell, and you will get the bill. You may want to have your folks verify their information with your vendors. So that's just a new angle that they're going after. And that happens at homes too, by the way. People doing that, just awful. So simple things that you can do. Phil, Chief Technology Officer update.
Sure, just to kind of dovetail on the security discussion, we are going to have some virus protection updates coming in May, and those are both with your management part of it, that we call EPO, and also with the virus scan that goes on each computer. I know you all are a heavy Windows school district, so that would impact you all. It's important for you all to keep that virus protection updated. So all I can tell you about the new piece that goes on the computer that replaces virus scan is called ENS, and it is a very much better. You know how on a Windows workstation sometimes the virus protection will interfere with you doing your business, and it's a little bit aggravating. I know it is for me. So that is supposed to be a lot smaller. That footprint, those DAT files are supposed to be a lot smaller, and a lot more accurate. And I've seen some studies already, and I'm going to send some of this out to school districts. I've seen some studies where it's looks like it's about 99% accurate as far as even doing things like malware. So that's a really good thing, a really good positive thing from the security standpoint. Last week we were, as you know, we upgraded our internet pipe that serves all Kentucky school districts from 40 gig to 80 gig. And it's kind of funny I'm talking about this because I can remember, doesn't seem like too long ago, but I know it's been a long time ago, where we had, a tenth of that kind of bandwidth serving our school districts and all of state government for the most part. And now it's just 40 gig for our school districts, and we upgraded that to 80 gig last week. And it's good for me to kind of report that this is probably the only upgrade that we've done to that scale that hasn't had a lot of broken glass. In fact, I can't even identify one piece of broken glass that we've had from that upgrade. And keep in mind that upgrade is in response to our increase in internet usage by 70% in the last 12 months. So that's something that we kind of anticipated that we would need, and we have been planning that upgrade for a year. So this is not something that we just do when we see, oh well, we're hitting our heads. We actually kind of project out. That's one of the reasons we try to collect a lot of data, is to be able to project out, because we understand that these upgrades do take a long time. So going to 80 gig was necessary because last week earlier this week, we did hit a peak of 43 gig, which would have meant school, districts and teachers and students would have been having a bad experience if we hadn't done that upgrade.
Which is interesting is, I said, Phil, does this upgrade have to happen now? All the teachers are taking their TEL survey. He says,
we had this debate on text messaging right before the upgrade took place.
I said, just make sure it goes well, because they're not going to remember the past year going great. They're going to remember the past few days, which we all know and that's one of the limitations of the TEL that we know. They just remember the most immediate. But technology one is in particular. So I'm glad it went well, Phil. But as Phil told me is, if you don't do it now, they're going to get slow and they're going to complain about that. So which one do you want? So we upgraded, and it went well. Thank you, Phil.
It did-
And
it did
team,
go
and
well,
all our
so.
vendor partners that, and our folks on our team to help make that
Well,
happen.
so, we have a good team that works on it. AT&T works on it. And again, the stuff behind the scenes, it took a year. The actual electronics had to be special made to accommodate one user that needed 80 gig of internet access, and it actually was made overseas, got caught in customs, and and it took a long time to get all that through. But it's been a year-long event that we've been planning, and now we're looking at are we going to have another 50 or 70% upgrade in the next 12 months, and do we need to start going from 80 to 160? And I don't know what that looks like or what that entails. That's probably something that we're going to be talking about real soon. So keeping on top of that, it's a pretty big deal. So, and we do it because we want to make sure that the teachers and students have a great experience in the classroom. And I was just noticing the very day after we got the upgrade, I went in and did some Google searches and did went on to some websites that I didn't have cached, and it was very, very responsive. So hopefully our students and teachers have seen a difference in that. So the next thing I really want to talk about, and we had a question on Go Soapbox, was just an update on the issue with Avaya. Are you on an Avaya shop or an Extreme?
We are today.
Avaya shop, okay. So for a networking perspective, Avaya holds about 35% or 33% of the overall sales for last year.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky, and Extreme has the majority of the rest of it. And we did have 5 vendors on contract, and the important part, I guess the key part about Avaya declaring bankruptcy in January. And keep in mind, this bankruptcy is not I'm going to go out of business and I'm going to disappear, because there's been a lot of companies over time that have declared bankruptcy, and they call this what they call Chapter 11, which means it's let me reorganize my debt and let me restructure my debt so I can pay it back. And usually the creditors are very happy with that. Usually you don't intend to sell a bunch of stuff off, but in this case, Avaya did get a bid, an offer, through the bankruptcy process from Extreme to buy their networking components. And so Extreme is one of our networking vendors. And so this becomes important if they were to win that effort. And it takes about 90 days before we would know for sure if that would happen or not. They call it the stalking horse process, and I'm not sure exactly what all that really means, but that means that they offer to bid and someone else can come in and bid higher for that. And if the courts were allowed it, they could not. Avaya Extreme could not win that bid because somebody else could. But then they can come back and they can rebid, higher, and it can kind of be in a bidding war, I guess, is what that really means. So we've seen a lot of changes in the past with our contracts, especially with Avaya. Avaya used to be Synoptics back in the early days when we first put our first CATS networking contracts in place. Then they married with Wellfleet, which was another one of our contract holders for router components. And then they become Bay Networks, and all of this sometimes is generated by things like bankruptcy and buyouts and mergers and those kinds of things. Then they became Nortel. Nortel declared bankruptcy, and Avaya bought them. That's how we end up with Avaya for the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. And Avaya was also one of our voice providers. So they also have a voice contract. Avaya has a really, really big footprint in the voice part in Kentucky. It's, I think, 60, it's in the 65% range, I think is what it is. So they got a very, very big footprint from a voice perspective. Y'all have that in, okay, Avaya Voice also. So the reason I'm kind of giving you the background on all this is because our contracts are in place and districts are needing to, buy things and purchase networking components, and they want to make sure they get E-rate discounts on those, and that's a really, really important thing. So if Extreme were to buy Avaya network, that means we have one less vendor for districts to choose from an E-rate perspective. And we also have another vendor that in Dale, they have a networking contract with us also that's E-rate eligible, but they have not signed the renewal yet, and they have till the 28th of this month to do that. So if Dale were not to sign that renewal, and Extreme were to purchase the Avalia part, that means we're down to two vendors, which would be HP and Extreme. And we all know HP does not have a spin number and does not, and a district is not able to get E-rate discounts. So that really gives us down to one for an E-rate perspective. So we're keeping a very close eye on that, and we'll report out that, what we learn going forward, and we're very much hoping that Dale would sign that agreement and continue on for next year. It gives districts an option, even though they have a small market share as far as networking goes. So, any questions on that, or you all had any conversations about your current situation with the Avalia? Are you getting ready to do new purchases, or
How will it affect E-rate purchases over the last couple of years, switching from Avalia to Extreme, or will it?
It might be, that might be the case, and so I would have to get Mike and probably Scott Kane to answer those questions, and as we learn more, we will get more out about that to school districts concerning how that would affect E-rate. So, but it's all very, a little bit concerning to us, because we certainly don't want districts to lose any kind of E-rate eligibility. As far as support goes, if Extreme, they have told us, if they were to assume the networking part, that they would continue on with the whatever support agreements you all have and stuff. So,
In just regards to HP, it's an internal business decision by HP not to apply for a SPIN number, and that's something that's self-imposed, self-inflicted. So we've asked for years the most successful companies and sales reps that I've worked with over 25 years, they overcome the internal bureaucracy of their organization. And so I do think there's a challenge trying to get up to the CEO level, and they've had people, come and go over the years, which has probably made that more difficult to establish a relationship with the senior management. But we definitely would encourage HP to try to change their business model and their business decision and just apply for it. It's something they've been able to do for there's nothing that's holding them back besides an internal, business policy on that. So we would like for them to expand that out, to comply like all the other vendors have that we've had that are E-rate eligible over the past, I guess it's getting close to 20 years, have done that. They found a way, and I would encourage, HP. So I've had one or two of your districts ask about HP, probably on their behalf. I'd encourage you to try to, have someone talk to their senior manager about changing that policy. We would like them to be competitive in that world.
If we only get down to Extreme, and one on the contract, is there steps in place in the contract for competitive pricing with them, or are they just going to be able to come in and do what they want?
well, if that's the case, we will take a look at rebidding this whole contract and putting a new contract in place, probably.
If we see, but to be honest with you, we have one in our financial management system, so there's always the threat of that. So if we see gouging, but I got to tell you, I've talked to you all before, I work at the national level with something called the CIO portal, which compares Kentucky's costs across the country. And I would tell you, in most cases, Kentucky has the best pricing and a wide variety of components that any other state gets in their districts. And it's because we leverage the buying power of our entire state and do a lot of smart things there. So as long as I don't see gouging, that will come into play. If you see that, it's just like all of our vendors with municipal campus. If we saw their performance was really bad, their pricing was really bad, or something else, then it makes you say, you know what, we got to do something about that.
Our best case scenario is if we have vendors that are really healthy and have good market share and they're competitive. So that's when we're going to get our best services and best prices for sure. But we will absolutely keep an eye on that, and it's always a concern of ours. So,
yeah. Just a quick 30-second legislative update. It's getting close to the end of it. The next webcast will probably spend more time on what does that mean, whatever came out of legislative session on education technology, if anything major. This was not a funding session. This was mainly when they're coming up with new regulation or laws. So, but it does have, some funding implications to districts as far as education technology. So we'll hit on that more next time. I do want to thank Russell County for being our host. Your board members joining us, mayor's joining us, and the rest of the team here. Any other final comments you'd like to make?
Just appreciate you all being here with us this morning. Appreciate the support that you all provide us.
Thanks.
And a shout out to Miss Judy Evans. She's always good to our point of contact for the district. And so we just appreciate you and your team.
Great. Well, thank you. All right. Take care. We'll see you all next month. I think Magoffin County, actually, we're going to be next month. So see you in Magoffin County. Take care.